I inherited the land 10 years ago. At the time, it wasn't worth much to anyone except my family. Just open ground, old fencing, and a quiet stretch of space most people drove past without noticing. There were no luxury homes nearby back then. No manicured lawns. No homeowners association breathing down anyone's neck. Just land that had been in my family for generations, passed down quietly, without drama. For years, nothing changed. I paid the taxes. Maintained the property. Let it sit the way it always had. Peaceful. Undisturbed. Forgotten. Then the development started. First came the survey trucks. Then the clearing. Then the houses. Row after row of brand new homes, built fast and sold even faster. Within a few years, the land around mine had transformed into a gated HOA community. Streetlights. Rules. Committees. Enforcement letters. The kind of place where grass height mattered more than common sense. And suddenly, my land mattered. Real estate prices exploded. Investors started calling. Appraisers showed up uninvited. What had once been ignored was now sitting in the middle of something valuable. By the time the market settled, my property was valued at nearly $10 million. That's when the HOA started noticing me. At first, it was subtle. A letter asking about future development plans. A suggestion that my land could benefit the community. Invitations to attend HOA meetings I wasn't a member of. Polite language. Friendly tone. I ignored them. Not out of spite. Out of principle. I wasn't part of their HOA. I never had been. My land predated their neighborhood. Their rules didn't apply to me, and I wasn't interested in playing along just to make them feel comfortable. That didn't sit well with them. The letters changed tone. They started mentioning safety concerns. Access issues. Noise complaints, even though nothing on my land had changed. They framed everything as a problem that needed managing. Managing meant control. Then the cops showed up for the first time. No warning. No call. Just a cruiser pulling onto my driveway, lights on, asking questions. They said the HOA had reported suspicious activity. Trespassing. Unauthorized use of land. Claims that didn't make sense because I was the owner. I showed the officer my deed. The survey. The tax records. He apologized and left. I assumed that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next year, the police showed up again. And again. Different officers. Same story. Each time, the HOA claimed something new. Noise. Environmental concerns. Illegal structures. None of it held up. Every time, the officers left frustrated, embarrassed, or quietly annoyed. But the harassment didn't stop. The HOA began documenting my land as if it were part of their community. The newsletters referred to it as adjacent shared space. Their internal emails talked about future integration. They even included my land on a community map once, shaded the same color as HOA property. That's when I realized something important. They weren't confused. They were testing boundaries. Each police call wasn't about enforcement. It was about pressure. About seeing how much inconvenience they could create before I gave in. Before I showed up to a meeting. Before I negotiated. Before I sold. The cops were just the tool. The breaking point came on a quiet afternoon. I was walking the property line when another cruiser arrived. This time, the officer looked uncomfortable before he even stepped out of the car. He told me the HOA had filed a formal complaint alleging illegal land use and possible code violations. I asked him if he'd read the file. He said yes. And then he said something that changed everything. He said this was the fourth call about my property in 6 months. And every single one had been unfounded. He told me the department was starting to notice. That night, I requested public records. Emails between the HOA and the police department. Call logs. Complaint summaries. It didn't take long to see the pattern. The HOA wasn't reporting emergencies. They were manufacturing them. I took everything to a lawyer. He didn't hesitate. He said what the HOA was doing bordered on harassment. Potentially abuse of emergency services. Definitely civil interference. And if it continued, it could turn into something much more serious. So we waited. We documented. And sure enough, the HOA escalated. They sent a letter claiming my land was subject to HOA oversight due to community impact. They warned me that failure to comply could result in enforcement actions. The language was vague on purpose, designed to sound official without actually stating authority. Then they made their biggest mistake. They called the cops again. This time claiming there was an unauthorized gathering on my land. There wasn't. I was alone, standing near the fence line, waiting. The officers arrived. I handed them a folder. Everything. Deeds. Surveys. Tax records. The call history. The HOA emails. The pattern laid out clean and undeniable. One of the officers read quietly for a long time. Then he asked me if I wanted to file a formal harassment complaint. That question changed the power dynamic instantly. Within weeks, the police department issued a warning to the HOA. They informed them that continued unfounded calls could result in penalties. That emergency resources were not a tool for intimidation. The HOA didn't like that. They shifted tactics again. Now it was code enforcement. Environmental agencies. Claims about protected land use. Anything that could bring another authority into the mix. Each one failed. And each failure added to the record. Eventually, a county official contacted me directly. He said they'd received multiple complaints from the same source about my land. He wanted to verify ownership. I sent him the documents. He confirmed everything. Then he asked the question that ended it. Why does this HOA believe they have authority over land worth $10 million that they don't own? There was no good answer. The county issued a notice. The HOA was formally instructed to cease all enforcement attempts related to my property. Any further interference would be considered unlawful. That notice didn't stay private. Residents found out. Questions started circulating. Why was the HOA spending money harassing someone outside the community? Why were police being called over nothing? Why had property lines been misrepresented? Board meetings grew tense. Resignations followed. And then, finally, the call stopped. The cops haven't been back since. The letters stopped arriving. The maps were corrected. My land stayed exactly where it always had been. Quiet. Private. Mine. Looking back, the money was never the point. The $10 million valuation just made the HOA desperate. Desperate enough to forget where their authority ended. Desperate enough to believe pressure could replace ownership. They were wrong. Land doesn't change hands because someone complains loudly enough. Authority doesn't appear because someone pretends long enough. And cops don't belong to HOAs, no matter how many times they call. I didn't fight them. I outlasted them. And sometimes, that's all it takes.